Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Earth Dawn Survival Guide, a podcast for novices and masters alike. I am Dan. My co-host is, of course, Josh.
Hello.
And on today's podcast, we will be discussing all things magical, mechanical, zoological, and non-individual, because today's topic is about Cavalrymen, but we are actually 24 episodes in, so if we were the Kiefer Sutherland Show 24, we'd be here once a week as well, and we would take forever to get to the end of this. However, we have a long way to go. But if you want to contact us with any questions you've got over anything we've ever talked about or anything we're going to talk about, because we are waiting for things on patterns, because we know that's going to be a big topic one of these days, feel free to email us at edsgpodcast@gmail.com. But other than that, how about we just dive right in? Because it's Cavalryman. In my 20 years of playing this game, I've owned it for 27, but I couldn't get anyone to play for the first 7. 20 years of playing this game and running this game, I have had exactly one player make one Cavalryman. So this is my least understood discipline because I've had nobody actually play one or be one, essentially.
Yeah.
So we're going to do a deep dive.
We are. I've not actually in any of the games that I've run had a Cavalryman. There is one in the Legends of Earth Dawn game. Rusty plays Garth, who is a Windling Cavalryman.
Yeah.
Who is... Windling Cavalrymen are generally the ones that are easiest to deal with.
Yeah.
Because the problem that you run into with Cavalrymen is that they've got a mount. And that takes up space. We talked a little bit back in our Beastmaster episode about the issues that you can run into with, Beastmaster animal companions.
Yes.
But then you get into the Cavalrymen and they have an animal companion as well, but unless they're a Windling and they have a small one, tends to be larger.
Considering the picture in the book is of the 4th edition book is the troll riding a rhinoceros, I'd say yes, that's a small.
Yeah, I mean you get into stuff like the Thunder Beasts and Dyers and things like that are big and strong. Especially if you're going to be running a campaign that is going to be delving into kaers at any point.
Yep,
you are likely to run into problems having a Cavalryman in the group just for space concerns. Now, the one thing, the one thing that I would want to point out to people who look at that as a potential problem is to remember that a kaer was designed as a community. It is a place where people would be living for centuries, and they would have space there not only to live, but also to grow crops and have livestock and things like that.
Yes.
So the actual amount of space that would be there for a Cavalryman character to be able to operate isn't actually much of a stretch. The popular conception, because of the legacy of Dungeons and Dragons, is that a kaer, as Earth Dawn's equivalent of a dungeon, is going to have a whole bunch of tight corridors and things like that. And that's not really the case.
No.
But still, Cavalrymen, you run into a little bit of the animal companion problem. You run into a little bit of the required space, because as we get into the complexity of just mounted combat in general, so we get into the talents and whatnot, we'll probably highlight some of that.
Well, and the logistics of feeding it, and I hate to say cleaning up after it, but every once in a while it does come into play. But the one character, Cavalryman character that came into my campaign, did so right as I brought everyone into par length, and that was our last episode, or the one before that, where, they went down into the catacombs, and so had to figure out how to jury rig a rope setup, tie a harness around the mount, get the mount and the Cavalryman down into because it wasn't a straight slope or stairs. And so, there's just a hole in the ground going to the catacombs. So the logistics of that as well.
Sure. Take, for example, the adventure Terror in the Skies.
Oh, love that one.
Potential spoilers here, but a big feature, one of the sort of set piece features of that adventure is an exploration of a Windling kaer, and the access to it is as an elevator shaft, basically,
at the top of a mountain
with a rickety, elevator in it.
Yeah.
And like dealing with a cavalryman in that situation, it's a nightmare.
Well, and then you have to, you are on an airship, a large airship, and maybe you have to take the Drakkar, which only seats like 7 or 8 people, average size name givers, and you have to go fight a flying horror the size of a blimp. And so where does your mount fall into that as well?
Yeah.
Unless you have a flying mount.
Yeah, again, that's where the Windling Zoke mount, the flying mount for Windlings is the epitome, because basically it carries all of the advantages that you have as a Windling character where you can fly.
Yeah, because I want to see the troll riding the rhino going to terror in the skies, and you'll have a not fun time.
Sure. It strikes me that the Cavalryman Adept is really, really cool when it comes to fleshing out the setting and like because one of the setting things are the orc cavalries, the Scorcher bands and mercenary cavalries and things like that for the nomadic orc tribes. And other nomads like the Dingani and stuff like that you have maybe from other races. And that the Cavalryman Adept basically shows how the magic has been adapted to that lifestyle, and that it is less something that is good player character choice unless you've got a campaign that is going to be focusing on it. One of the, like, back of my brain ideas, if I ever get to the point of running campaigns again, is to run a cavalry focused campaign, which is to basically to be a game where not necessarily everybody is a cavalryman adept, but that's going to be the premise, the idea of the group, that they will be sort of a unit that operates on horseback, maybe working for Carafod, which is where a cavalryman group I think would be ideal.
Oh, totally.
But possibly a cavalry unit for Thrall or even just a small mercenary band or something like that. But to have if you build the campaign around the idea of it being a cavalry unit with individual characters maybe following other disciplines, but maybe them all having some kind of skills in animal handling and stuff like that. I think that could be really interesting.
I do. I think you just being crafty enough, and I know that you are, I would take the word apocalypse, make an anagram of it, and call it the 4 horsemen of whatever that anagram happens to be. So I would just do that, but that's me. But I mean, to the serious nature of how important cavalrymen are, page 17 of the 4th edition Player's Handbook is To the Saddle Born. It is a story about how someone becomes cavalryman. So this is important to Earth Dawn, and I can't find anything rather similar in D&D to my recollection. Again, you've played it more than I have.
The closest thing that you find in D&D is the special mount that a paladin gets.
I played a paladin. I didn't even get that high. So.
Yeah, that's something that you get later on. But yeah, that's sort of the closest thing, the closest analog that you get. You can maybe see that in a ranger that has animal companions, but that's more Beastmaster field than mounted knight. It's
still, I don't think, in D&D, and we're going to make that comparison because that's what every fantasy game is going to be compared to, no matter what. We've said it before. But I don't think that there's quite the same comparison with a cavalryman in Earth Dawn with the heart bond that the cavalrymen themselves and their mount develop, because that is integral to the character nature. And, as you said, a lot of talents are based upon them and their mount.
Yeah, the cavalryman really, really shines in mounted combat, which is a little bit more complex than standard combat in terms of just like the amount of space and movement and actions required and whatnot. And when they are not mounted, they're okay, but they're not great.
Yeah.
Like if they end up being on foot, they can fight okay, but they lose a lot of the tricks that really make them shine as a combat class.
Yeah, because being mounted in history of warfare before modern capabilities, being mounted actually led you a certain advantage. Mm-hmm. And without that advantage, they're not the same. And they don't take the losing of a mount lightly. So Paladin may get a mount in D&D, But, it's a dime a dozen. They can be like the Pony Express and just trade horses in the next town. Whereas in Earth Dawn, to lose that mount is like losing your best friend and your child and your mom at the same time.
Yeah, so. that is generally considered one of the sort of defining traits of the Cavalryman from a philosophical point of view, from the definition of the. Interestingly enough, though, where it kind of talks about in the Adept's Way essay about the Cavalryman, it does talk about the bond and whatnot. While it is important, I think different cavalrymen, particularly depending on their race, what name giver race they are, would have different views on that. Because an elf who lives a lot longer is apt to go through a lot more mounts over the course of their life and career than they would, say an orc who will go through, one or two.
Yeah.
So, certainly the bond between rider and mount is important, but the way that is expressed and the way that you can look at that in terms of your own character's point of view on that is, does have some variation on it.
Yes, but it offers a fantastic role-playing opportunity for the character and for the game master to do so.
Oh, yeah.
To prepare that player for, it is an inevitable tragedy of losing a mount. Just like anytime us as people buy a pet, you're going to outlive the cat, the dog, unless you buy a turtle.
There are many examples in pop culture of the important mount, and so forth. Like David Eddings, I forget the names of the series, but the ones with Sparhawk.
Is it Belgarian?
No, the Belgariad is the other one. It's the Elenium and the Tamuli, I think, are the two series, but they're the ones with Sparhawks.
I can't remember that.
But Sparhawk is a knight, and his horse is like a character as much as he is. You've got in Disney's Hunchback of Notre Dame, an underrated film, but you've got Phoebus, the horse of his horse. Phoebus is the character. I can't remember the horse's name offhand, but is also like a character in that regard. So there are, of course, other examples that you could take from myth and legend and things like that.
Yes. Just Sleipnir, which is Odin's horse, eight-legged horse.
Yep.
And that's where we actually get the moniker of Santa Claus and his 8 reindeer, because it was transferred from the Norse. So, yeah. One of those things. So let's go ahead and do a breakdown here of the Cavalryman. Again, I like I said, I love the fact that the picture is of a troll riding a rhino and not a horse.
Well, it's not even really a rhino. It looks like it's. I think it's maybe supposed to be like a thunderbeast kind of thing because it looks kind of dinosaur-y.
I know. I
with the claws and
all
the
animals
frill.
I could in the Game Master's Guide, and I was like, it's either a thunderbeast or a rhino, and I had to go with rhino because it has up to 2 horns and it's kind of scaly, and I think but picture of the rhinos on the poster.
Yeah, so. but rhinos don't have like claws, and they don't have like rhino. The frill. but I don't like a thunderbeast is the cross between a rhinoceros and an angry dinosaur.
Yes, so let's go with Thundra. I'm okay with that. That works for me. So anyway, the cover ritual, as we said, pretty much didn't change. I love the fact that it has to include the mount leading them on the second half of the ritual back to the target. So that, of course, absolutely just reinforces their worldview that it's the two of them, period, as a unit of 2. Right. Rider and mount. Done. Of course, the important attributes are charisma, dexterity, and perception, because charisma, you have to win that animal over, and you have to have that bond with him. Dexterity, of course, just to stay mounted.
and you're a combat discipline. Dexterity is obviously important if you're going to be attacking stuff.
Absolutely. And then, of course, perception, just because you need to notice things. Your mount needs to notice things. You have to have that bond of all your senses are alive and awake and aware. So yeah, but the artisan skills, body painting and braiding, because as you said, the Adept's Way essay has this wonderful thing in there about the braid between the mount and the rider themselves. So
right, like the thing that's described in there is when the mount passes, the rider will take some of the hair from their mane or tail and braid it into their own hair, or basically make an honor braid in memory of that memory of that mount.
Totally. And unless you think that rhinoceri, yes, plural, rhinoceri do not have hair, their horn is actually compressed hair. So they do have hair to give for that braid. So,
but they may have some other way.
There's the zoological part of what I introduced.
There you go.
Just saying. But their half magic test, of course, brings in different types of mounts, upkeeping of riding gear, animal husbandry, first aid for the units, cavalry units in history of Barsave or currently operating in Barsave. So yeah, just... Again, knowledge you should have that we're not going to make you spend any skill points on, legend points on developing. It's just half magic, go. So, well done on all of the...
And then the cavalryman starts with a mount.
Which I love.
Yeah, well, they have... I mean, obviously, they have to because...
that's who they are.
That's part of the point. And it basically just kind of goes through and says, for a starting character, these are what you would typically have for mounts.
And I do love the fact that it gives a page number to go look at and a selection instead of having to just thumb through the entire Game Master's Guide to go, can I ride that? No. Can I ride that? No.
Yeah, those lists, the page numbers there are in reference to that page 431 is the list of mounts in the player's guide at the end of the equipment chapter
section. Yes.
Right. And then the 395 is the reference to basically what defines I think that's in the mounted combat section and talking about like what it means for a mount to be combat trained.
Yes. Mounted combat sequence, mounted knockdown tests, so forth and so on. Mount training. Yeah. So absolutely perfectly useful help right there. Just with 2 sentences. Instead of having to rifle through the rest of the book, just go here, get it quick, done, go. So, love that. And it even gives, for the whole mount, it even gives the race specifics of, if you're Windling, you like these. If you're Trolls, tend to prefer these, and so forth and so on. So, it makes it absolutely just marvelous. Why would you not want to play one? Because, again, I've only had one player in 20 years one Cavalryman, so. But no starting free talent.
No, because they're primarily a combat discipline, so they get the high durability in exchange for the no free talent. And
so just wanted to make sure we stated that for obvious sake. But since they are combat. So yeah, let's go ahead and durability of 7, because that's, again, mostly combat, just like the warrior. And I think the swordmaster, so talent breakdown. Beginning discipline talents, we've got animal bond.
Obvious.
Yeah. Charge, which has not been discussed before because this is mostly for mounted combat.
Yeah. The charge talent is only available to the cavalryman. It's basically how the cavalryman does even more damage when mounted.
Yeah, because you've got the mass of you and your mount riding at speed, so that momentum is just going to...
Right. And charge just basically adds an additional rank on top of everything else for damage that you deal. The situation with charge is that while it does do a lot of damage, and anybody who has listened to the Legends of Earthdawn game will know what that means because of what Gareth can dish out. Charge generally, at novice circles, charge is something that you're for the most part only going to be able to do every other round. Basically because in order for charge to trigger, you need to have moved a certain amount towards the target to build up that momentum in order to do that extra damage.
Yeah.
And so basically, like, you will charge in and hit, and do the damage, and then you need to spend the next round, like, moving away, and then turn around and come back. And that's where some of the logistical and tactical issues of the cavalryman and the complexity of mounted combat can come into play. Just in terms of needing the space to be able to move around and do that. If you are in an area where there's not the room for a cavalryman to maneuver, especially at novice circles, a lot of their output is hindered.
So they can kind of sympathize with spellcasters who have to take a round and threadweave and then take another round and cast.
Yeah, basically, ideally what happens is that you charge to the target and deal charge damage. The next round, you make your attack on them without charge, and then move away. And then the next round, you move back in. And, like, ideally, that's the sort of situations that you're still able to attack every round, but it's only every other round, really, that charge comes into play. Yeah. At least to start off with, and we'll get into...
So there's your survival guide tip of the week right there, how to actually maximize your cavalryman's movement there. Because charge, as we said, is for mounted combat, but charge replaces your strength step on your damage of whatever weapon you're using.
Right.
As long as you're moving toward the target.
Right. So you get your charge step plus your weapon damage step plus your mount's strength step as well.
Yes.
So that's when you are doing a charging attack, that's where the cavalryman's damage really, especially when you get some of the bigger mounts like the Thundra Beast and whatnot that have just, ridiculously high strength steps. That's gonna make their damage output even more impressive.
Mount up that Grand Lane and go to town.
And because charge is a talent, this is the other novice tier talent that allows an adept to spend karma on damage.
There you go. So I think that's what our second.
So them and Beastmaster. Yep. Yeah. Them and Beastmaster are the only ones I think in novice tiers that can spend karma on damage.
Yeah. Claw Frenzy.
Claw Shape.
Claw Shape, sorry. Always get those two mixed up. Anyway, so we've got Animal Bond, Charge, melee weapons, which is a big deal because you have to carry along something. And of course your thread weaving because everyone gets that. And then of course trick riding. Yeah,
trick riding serves a couple of purposes. One, it's what the cavalryman rolls anytime that they're trying to do something fancy while mounted, including it substitutes for avoid blow. Like if the cavalryman is mounted, they can do a trick riding instead of avoid blow to try and avoid attacks against themselves or their mount.
As long as they're on their mount, yeah.
As long as they're on their mount, yeah.
Yeah, and trick riding involves other things as well, as far as just...
Yeah, like if you're trying to get your mount to jump across a ravine or, or to do anything kind of fancy when it comes to maneuvering or doing stuff with your mount, basically, or to try maybe get your mount to do something that they wouldn't normally be inclined to do. Trick riding is basically what you fall back on that.
Yeah, and for feats that you want to do as well. I just think back to the movie Three Musketeers, where the horse gets to go under this little tiny bridge, and they're standing up on their horse on the saddle, riding it so they can cross over the bridge at the end, and then hop back on the horse at the end. So just of the scene and things like that. Or if they need to retrieve the weapon off the ground, like in the movie Wonder Woman, where they're riding on the beach, they just lean down, grab the weapon off the ground, and get back on the horse. So again, that would fall under trick riding.
Yeah.
So things like that. Anything you've ever seen anybody do in a Hollywood movie on a horse, trick riding.
Pretty much, trick riding. Jumping onto the horse's back from the balcony of the saloon after you have, upset the guy or basically any kind of fancy physical action that you do with your mount that would require a test is basically trick riding.
Yes.
I think the more stuff that you can justify to use trick riding with, the better. The easier. Yeah.
Because again, it's a discipline talent. You can use karma. Yep. So second circle, of course, they get a +1 to physical defense. They are, of course, the fighting type, so they're going to have that. But the discipline talent goes to animal training.
Yep. It allows them to teach their mount tricks and also do some other stuff.
Voice commands.
Voice commands. I mean, again, pop culture. Like you look at, the horses that, like Brisco County's horse, Comet. I think it was Comet was his name. I think his horse's name was Comet.
5 years ago. Yeah. I'll grant you that one. Sure.
or Xena's horse, Argo, is also like, anytime that you've got you can get your mount, train your mount to do stuff, but it also, because it's the talent, allows the cavalryman, at least as written, to enhance some of their natural skills or abilities as well.
Well, I'm gonna pull a pop culture reference from 50 years ago. How about Trigger?
Trigger for the Lone Ranger. Yeah, there you go. But there's a lot of stuff, like a lot of the stuff that you see in the Cavalryman kit as discipline talents is stuff that's optional for the Beastmaster because the mount is so fundamental to the Cavalryman. Like those are all given as discipline talents because of that relationship.
It's integral. Fundamental integral, basically the same thing. But yeah, I agree. There is no substitute. So we've had other discussions about other disciplines where we're like, what could you maybe find that would be better there? No, there is nothing better here than animal training at second circle, and now to go third circle, enhance animal companion.
Yeah, when we talked about
call animal companion.
Yeah,
that's it. There is no substitute for any of those three.
Yeah, but Enhanced Animal Companion we talked about with the Beastmaster, it is something that is designed to basically make the mount which, as the character gains experience, especially if you're talking about something that is presumably going to be with them the animal's entire life. You want to maybe not make them so squishy. So that's what Enhance Animal Companion is sort of intended to do, is to make them a little bit more durable. Call Animal Companion, obviously, like, oh, I'm going to be able to get my mount to come to me from... distance. He knows. I send a mental call and he breaks out of the stable and comes to my aid, kind of thing.
Hence Trigger from the Lone Ranger.
So yeah, all of those discipline talents are like, you've got the mount. The mount is such an integral part to the character that we need to give you the stuff to make the mount progressively more and more useful as your character gains experience and advances through their circles.
Absolutely. So well done on the design of that. Very easily.
I do actually want to point out here that Morgan has come up with, it's intended a little bit more for Beastmasters, but is applicable in some ways to the Cavalryman as well. On his blog, the Panda Gaming Grove has done up like an alternate approach to animal companions and the talents and knacks and how those work. If anybody's looking at a little bit of a different take, definitely go in and check those out, because with something that is as complex as animal companions and mounts, there's always a lot of tinkering and fine tuning and stuff that can come to play there. So, if you're not happy. Yeah, if you're not happy with how things are right now, maybe go take a look at that and see if there's some stuff that you can crib from to improve your experience.
Well, yeah, since we are the unofficial 4th edition Earth Dawn podcast, then we'll obviously throw you toward the unofficial blog spot, Panda Gaming Grove, and go from there, because it's, Morgan's. And by all means, we love Morgan. Morgan does an awesome job. So let's go to the options, since those are clear-cut discipline talents, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th circle. There is no ifs, ands, or buts about them. Let's go to the options, because this is where people get to actually add some flavor to their individual cavalrymen.
Yep, this is where you start picking up the stuff for your own, for rather than focusing on the mount, of picking up the stuff that your PC, your character, has in terms of their style and whatnot.
When you are dismounted, which is hopefully seldom, avoid blow.
Avoid blow can be handy when you can't do trick riding. Avoid blow will work. The drawback is avoid blow you could still use while mounted, but only for attacks on you, whereas trick riding will allow you to attempt to avoid attacks both against you and your mount. So that is something to keep in mind.
Yes.
But also avoid blow, obviously you can't use trick riding if you're not mounted. So avoid blow would come in handy if you're trying to not get hit while you are on foot.
And every once in a while, since those rules are described as, being dismounted, maybe you might get knocked off your mount and it'll have to come back to you in a minute or so. For that one round, avoid blow is handy. So then battle shout.
Yeah, that's a sort of fear intimidation. It kind of goes along with the idea of the fierce mounted warrior intimidating their opponents with roars and battle cries and stuff.
Yeah, that sounds like something cavalry would absolutely do. Blood share, and I think that's even part of the bonding.
So this is one that probably should be arguably a discipline talent.
Fair.
Because it allows the rider to take damage from their mount onto themselves, or vice versa, though usually because the rider has a lot more health, they will be taking damage from their mount. But because of the stuff that was in there in terms of improving your mount, in terms of like making those available in the novice as discipline talents, Bloodshare there wasn't a spot for it. Maybe swap it in for either animal training or call animal companion if you really want it as a discipline talent. You're finding for whatever reason one of those others isn't working for you. But that is probably out of all of the ones that we're going through here in the options that. Because it was in first edition, Bloodshare was pretty much only available to the cavalrymen. Like it was one of their defining abilities, the ability to share the damage back and forth with the mount and to kind of deal with recovery as a result of that. And it just, again, under this design paradigm, it just didn't have a spot really that worked well for it.
No, and I think it's still one of those, if the character that the player makes doesn't necessarily feel that would be right, then yes, make that an option. Because maybe somebody has more empathy toward animals than maybe you or I as making a character. Fine, it's an option. I still think Yeah, if you were going to swap it out, it would be probably, fourth circle, call animal companion, but that's just me. But yeah, I agree with you. That's the only one I would see. Okay, we can swap that. And I have no problem doing that either. So, conversation.
There's your, again, we had
Social
talked about
talent.
with some others that, there's your sort of basic social talent. You get kind of little ones here or there for any discipline that's not socially focused, but everybody, in theory would have some kind of social skills. So
except for the Beastmaster.
That's what it is.
Yeah. And conversation, I think, also goes to work for the mount themselves, because occasionally you'll have to, I can't say persuade one, but you're having a conversation. It can't talk back, but the cavalryman will have a conversation with their mount like it's their best friend.
Mm-hmm.
And so they'll tell the mount everything because they know the mount's never going to give up those secrets. And so
but that's not something that's you're gonna need to be rolling.
Shh. I'll make my players roll it. They just like to roll dice anyway. Creature analysis. Again, I think this goes right up the alley of.
Yeah, I mean, it plays into their animal theme. It allows the cavalrymen to gauge the capabilities of other animals as potential mounts, but also if they run into opposing forces who are on mounts that they don't recognize, to be able to get a feel for what those mounts are capable of.
Yeah, I figure if they can size up any animal to see if it's a potential candidate to mount, then they can just size up any animal, period. To say bigger, stronger, faster, tougher, whatever the case may be. So right up their alley. And then dominate beast.
Yep, dominate beast. If you're in a situation or you're maybe a cavalryman who is less like empathetic or friendly with your animals, although it's probably not something that I would encourage for a traditional like heroic player character, but for perhaps a villain or enemy cavalryman.
Oh, yeah.
The thing that dominate beast actually would work really well is for a cavalryman to cause problems for the mounts of their opposition.
I could so see like the city guard cavalryman, maybe a squadron,
or a situation where, heaven forfend, something happens to your mount, dominating an animal to act as your mount in some limited capacity for a time.
Yeah,
so it's certainly a tool that would make sense for a cavalryman, but
yeah, it's definitely an option, not a discipline talent. First impression,
a generally useful social talent.
Yeah, and because cavalrymen might occasionally come off as a little bit aloof because they're thinking about their mount, even though they're inside the bar having a drink with you. So yeah, first impression never hurts to allay the fears of I'm paying attention to you. Yes, heartening laugh. Kind of goes along with Battle Shout.
It goes along with Battle Shout. It is the sort of fear-resistant ability, and again, kind of just goes along with the general idea of the sort of vivacious, living large kind of orc cavalry stereotype that is the sort of archetype of the cavalryman in Earth Dawn. Yeah,
absolutely. It fills out the storyline aspect of that side of your character there. And then speak language, because it's always helpful.
If you're going to be a mercenary group, then being able to communicate with folks that might be hiring you is plenty useful.
Yes. And then sure mount.
Sure mount is another mount-related talent. It is basically helps you avoid being dismounted or your mount from being knocked down. Basically, it replaces any knockdown tests that the rider or mount needs to make while mounted.
Oh,
so it's kind of the knockdown equivalent of trick riding.
I was gonna say it's the wound balance. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the wound balance to trick riding's avoid blow.
Cool. All right then. So of the first 4 circles, I see absolutely nothing to quarrel with.
Yeah.
And I know you probably spent a lot of time on redesigning cavalrymen as long as everybody else, but I see nothing to quarrel with. This is a very solid start to anybody's development of their character as far as a cavalryman is concerned. It doesn't make me want to play one immediately, but I have now inklings in my head of what I would actually be wanting to do with mine were I to make one. So, because again, that Thunder Beast and Trolls were like appealing now. So when they get to 5th circle, they get a new special ability called One Soul, Two Bodies.
Yep. It basically gives them a bonus when doing non-combat stuff with their mount.
Mm-hmm.
It's a +2 bonus to anything that they do that's not directly combat related, because that would unbalance combat, basically.
Yeah.
So if you're doing So, like, trick riding, it would sometimes apply. Like, if you're trying to get your mount to jump over a fire or do something along those lines and it's not in a combat situation, then you would get the bonus. But if you're trying to do it to avoid a blow in combat, then it wouldn't.
Yeah.
And the reason that it works that way is just purely from a game balance standpoint. Because otherwise, then you're suddenly getting a +2 bonus to your attack tests or your, to all sorts of other stuff and giving you a bonus that other characters don't have access to.
Well, and like we said at the beginning of the show, this helps with the logistics of handling a secondary character that, causes those logistical problems. Like
potentially.
Getting into the catacombs in par length, and there's no staircase. So getting your mount to be lowered down there, I can't say against their will, but, things along those lines. And as I said, jumping over the fire or jumping over the ravine or, snakes, whatever the case may be. So yes, it also helps build a storyline in the downtime, non-combat time, air quotes, for you and your mount. So I love that one. And of course, they get to spend a karma point on any damage tests while mounted.
Yep. Again, like a lot of the combat disciplines do pick up a situational karma on damage ability at 5th circle. So while mounted, basically this allows the cavalryman to double up on karma for when they make charge tests. So they can use one from the talent and one from the discipline ability.
Yeah. So bring it at 5th circle for your cavalryman. So there you are. So if you're going to make mounted city guards, put them on make them cavalrymen, make them at least 5th circle, and then you can actually enforce these against your player characters. Oh, no, you won't either. So 5th circle discipline talent, armor mount.
Yep. This allows the adept to increase the armor of their mount. Again, it's a sort of mount survivability ability.
Yeah.
They basically, that they make a roll and for the duration of a combat, because it lasts for armor mount rank in minutes, they basically provide a bonus to their mount's natural armor. Make it a little bit harder for them to suffer wounds and take injury. This would be on top of any barding or anything like that if you happen to have some.
Yeah, so that's a wonderful thing to do. 6th circle, get another bonus to physical defense, and then they get the wheeling attack. This is where they get to do some really fun stuff.
Yep, this is basically where your charge talent... basically, you can start using your charge talent every round, I think. Let me just double check here. Wheeling attack.
It's been, like I said, it's been a while.
It's been a wheeling attack. Yeah, that basically you are no longer required to have your mount move a certain amount beforehand.
Yeah.
So that,
and you
basically
are required to use the splitting movement combat option.
Yep, but you don't suffer any penalties for it.
Yes, so that gets rid of the penalty at least, but there you are.
That basically what it allows you to do is if you've got the positioning up, you can basically do ride by charge attacks every round. That basically you're, normally like what I've been talking about at novice circles is that you charge in and then move away and then charge in and move away. Yeah. Whereas in this one, you're doing that full double move of your mount, but doing part of it before your attack and part of it after. And as long as you're doing that full movement, you get the charge bonus as long as at some point in that time you are striking the target. And so you can basically like run out doing a charge and then you're away and then you turn around and you run back and you kind of go back and forth there.
Almost like jousting. You attack in the middle.
Yeah. The drawback is that it is its own talent rank that you need to raise for the purposes of making attacks. Whereas the normal charge, like you're normally using your regular melee weapons. So it is a separate talent that you need to raise in order to make that effective. But still, it does allow you to increase your damage output notably because you are able, if the positioning is good, to do that.
Yeah,
every round.
Because again, this is not to replace charge, because that's why charge is the first circle.
Right. Well, charge is the damage test, much like claw shape is for the that basically this is the wheeling attack is the attack test that you make. If successful, then you can use charge on the damage.
Yes. So wanted to make that clear. And then of course 7th circle, you have to gain a whole other circle before you can do this one. The wheeling defense.
This is sort of the cavalryman's version of acrobatic defense. In that basically they are like prancing around and moving their mount a significant, quite a bit, and gaining a bonus to their physical defense as a result.
Yeah, because they're constantly moving and a harder target, therefore, to hit.
Mm-hmm.
So it works quite well. And then, of course, 8th circle, they get the other recovery test at 7th circle. And then at 8th circle, they get a bonus to the physical defense. Once again, so that's three. Yep. That's 3 bonuses to physical defense, 1 to social defense. Nothing to mystic. Just want to point that out.
Well, for most of the... In fact, I think all of the disciplines, at least in circles 1 through 8, the novice and journeyman tiers, they will get bonuses to 2 defenses.
Yes.
And usually, for most of them, it's +3 to 1 and +1 to a second. Mm-hmm. Then in their warden and master tiers, they will generally get a bonus to the 3rd type, the one that they haven't gotten before.
Yes.
But for the cavalrymen, because charisma is important, like the physical defense, obviously, social defense is secondary, and usually it's a net +3 to 1 and a +1 to the other. The swordmaster, which we haven't really discussed yet.
Soon,
but is the one exception to that because they get +2 to each physical and social. Yes. Because the swordmaster is a lot more balanced between them compared to others.
Agreed.
But no, the cavalrymen, basically the cavalrymen don't get the mystic defense bonus early on, which is a potential weakness for them.
Everybody has to have one.
Yep.
So yeah. But then 8th circle, they get the double charge.
Yeah.
It has to be said that way. It has to be said that way.
Yeah. Basically, you can make 2. It's the cavalryman's multi-attack ability.
Yeah.
It allows them to make 2 attacks during a charge, whether attacking the same target twice or 2 different targets, depending on how their movement does. They can use wheeling attack in conjunction with it, and then the second attack that they make is made using double charge. So it's equivalent to second attack, basically. Yeah. For cavalrymen. The cavalrymen get a lot of their own version of other stuff. You got trick riding as avoid blow. You've got sure mount as wound balance. You've got double charge as second attack. There's a lot of stuff. Yeah. But the reason for that is because all of these require them to be mounted. They are not the standard here's your second attack thing.
Yeah, so it's the mounted version of, which is fine. They need that.
Well, that makes sense. It does mean that they end up with a lot of unique talents because they're the only ones really that are magically mounted fighters.
Again, and it also tells you that anybody else who just decides to get on a horse and try their usual shtick is not going to work the same. They don't get any of these because these are talents specific to the cavalryman. So take your warrior, put him on a horse. It's not going to be the same as a cavalryman on purpose. So that makes them, cavalrymen that is, very unique in what they do and how they do it. So I agree with that. So we've got some options here for Journeyman. 5th circle to get the animal companion durability.
Yep, that allows the cavalryman to increase the health ratings of their mount.
Yeah.
Particularly useful. And again, one of those things that
could it be discipline talent? Sure.
Could it be discipline talent? But what are you gonna probably replace maybe armor mount with it at 5th circle?
Well, yeah.
I really would not want to get rid of wheeling attack. Yeah. I really would not want to get rid of wheeling attack or wheeling defense.
And I don't want to wait till 8th circle to get it.
Yeah. Well, then you miss out on double charge. You no longer have your second attack. So
exactly.
Armor mount seems to be and they're sort of roughly equivalent. Mm-hmm. So it's one or the other. You could swap them out depending.
Maybe if I were the game master and you wanted to do that, sure, because you're my second cavalryman player ever, so it works for me. And then otherwise, empathic sense because they have to have that bond with their mount.
Sure, it can be something to further flesh out their mental and spiritual connection with their mount, but it allows them as well to expand that to other people. And the sort of psychic and emotional and empathic understanding that kind of goes along with that.
Yeah. You need to have empathic sense without a doubt. But again, I couldn't see making that a discipline talent. So yeah, it's just, it's an option. Etiquette and
much like the warrior getting etiquette, with the kind of situations that a cavalryman is potentially going to be in when it comes to social stuff, knowing how to behave in the proper circumstances, whether that is within the context of the mercenary band that they're in, or dealing with the people
cavalry
that might be hiring them, or any that sort of thing.
Any cavalry unit that they happen to maybe come across, and
you probably will have like individuals within the unit that will have that ability, but probably officers and that sort of thing.
Yes,
but not something that everybody is necessarily going to have.
Yeah, so etiquette is necessary for those reasons. Sorry, fearsome charge, and again,
fearsome charge. If you're not going to take battle shout, but you want a scary, a scary intimidation kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. So since charge is the damage test, is fearsome charge a damage test?
No, fearsome. Basically, what happens is it's actually with a little bit of illusion magic. The cavalryman makes themselves look even more frightening as they are charging in, and it's a test against social defense. And it works similar to battle shout or taunt, where the victim suffers penalties as a result.
I was just wanted that clarified for those who cannot reach their books because they're listening to this while they're driving. Or doing other mundane tasks. So making sure, just to clear that one up real quick so they don't have to look it up. Leadership, of course, you're in a cavalry unit.
Officers.
Eventually you might want to lead. Not just other cavalry with you, but if you're on mounted horseback, you kind of command that respect a little bit. Perhaps you want to be leading your party.
Yep.
As the guy from, I have the higher seat, so we can go from there. Lionheart.
Another anti-fear ability, kind of along the lines of Heartening Laugh, but one that benefits just the adept as opposed to the group buff of Heartening Laugh.
Yes, missile weapons, because occasionally...
Because mounted archers are a thing.
And they're badass.
They can be.
Just saying.
I think if you really want to go into the sort of badass mounted archer thing, you take archer as a second discipline and get access to all of those tricks as well.
Totally.
Then missile, if you're not going to be going like the full blown archer route, but you need a ranged ability, missile weapons is not a bad one to grab.
True.
Because mounts, the scales of movement and so forth that you're going to be dealing with in the mounts are a lot more conducive to the ranged abilities of missile weapons.
Yes, and we should talk about the melee weapons that you should be using on a mounted combat. Lance versus sword.
Lance, spear. Yeah, we'll maybe touch on some of the mounted combat stuff real quickly once we get through the rest of this.
Absolutely, because we only got 3 left. Mount attack, which is I think getting your mount to gore somebody.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's basically it allows you to substitute for the mount's natural attack step when it's trying to kick or bite or otherwise harm other things.
There's only one game I've ever come across in my lifetime that actually had rules for stomping damage, and I like those rules. So I can't translate them to Earth Dawn yet. I'm still working on those as well, but just that's we'll put a pin in that one for later. 2 left. Spirit Mount.
This is really cool. It basically allows a cavalryman to summon a spiritual mount that unfortunately can't really gain the benefit of stuff like Enhanced Animal Companion or Animal Companion Durability or any of that stuff.
Yeah.
But it allows them to be mounted, and because it is spiritual, it can sink into the ground a little bit, making it a little bit easier for the cavalryman to be mounted while navigating maybe narrower corridors or tunnels or things like that.
Yeah, in case they're a troll.
Yeah, it kind of, it's one of those things that is a little bit counter to the theme of the cavalryman being strongly bonded with a specific mount, because at that point they are not they're not dealing with a flesh and blood mount that way. But I could certainly see something that would be useful. I mean, all of the other mounted combat talents that you would get would be really useful with Spirit Mount.
I see Spirit Mount as the in between, as in I just lost my other mount. It's passed, but I haven't found a replacement yet. I'll use Spirit Mount until I find the next one, or
if you're gonna go weird like a Nethermancer, a Nethermancer cavalryman. Multi-discipline combination, because I think Nethermancer gets access to Spirit Mount as a talent option as well because of their spirit connection.
Nice. Or I could see, going back to this Terror in the Skies thing, I could take my Spirit Mount on if I happen to get on top of the horror itself, the flying horror, I could use Spirit Mount. In that case, I would get most of my benefits back to attacking it itself.
Yeah. Potentially.
It's just the creative gameplay with that. Or like you said, I can't take my mount with me into that Windling Kaer, but I can take the Spirit Mount with me and do it that way. So that's the okay, I can patchwork this together type answer. And of course, tactics.
Which makes sense, again, if you're going to be dealing with, kind of goes along the lines with like leadership and etiquette. It's one of those things that would make sense for a cavalryman to have, but depending on your particular group's play style, may not be entirely appropriate to take as an option.
Fair.
Although the bonuses that it can provide can be nice.
Yes. I will say I have not considered much in first edition, second or classic, third edition, even of developing my own cavalryman, but the way the fourth edition is laid out, it makes me want to explore that further. I can't say soon, but at least I have it in my head now to want to push someone else to play it if they have an inkling.
Yeah.
Or to develop my own storyline for them. Or at least, start using them as city guards somewhere.
Mm-hmm. The cavalryman is really a cool discipline, and it's in some ways a shame that it is so logistically difficult and a little bit more complex in terms of the mounted combat rules and stuff that come into play with it.
Yeah.
That I certainly know that people who have had cavalrymen in their games tend to really, really like them because of what they are capable of doing. It's just the typical play format does not often allow them to really give them the chance to shine. And kind of in some ways like Air Sailor,
yes, to
a lesser extent, where they are really, really strong in a particularly limited area. Mm-hmm. Air Sailor has a lot of tricks that are useful off of an airship, but within that context, they really, really shine. And cavalrymen run into that similar kind of situation. The drawback is that a lot of the cavalrymen's tricks, if they're not mounted, they just don't have work. At that point, they don't have, I mean, they're okay, but they don't have the damage output of a warrior. They don't have a lot of the other sort of like defensive tricks and whatnot that a swordmaster or, any other discipline has. And so it can be difficult because you really need, as a game master, if you've got a player that wants to be a cavalryman, there's a lot of stuff that you need to take into account for your adventure and campaign design in terms of allowing them their moments in the spotlight to be able to do their awesome stuff, which is part of the reason why the most workable of that is the Windling Cavalrymen, because they tend to not have the space issues that more traditional horse or even larger animal cavalrymen will run into. Mm-hmm. That you can run a Windling on a Zoke or a Q, which is their cat lizard, not flying mount. Yeah. And both of those are small enough that you don't run into the physical limitations that you will with some other types. Dwarves on Trojan or Hutawa are also a little bit workable because those mounts are a little bit smaller. Yeah, although they run into a little bit larger, but a large dog. Mm-hmm. But they run into some issues when it comes to feeding them because both of those animals are carnivores. And so they are a little bit pricier to feed.
Yes.
But the Trojan is actually a pretty cool animal in general.
So a dwarf with one of those and a beastmaster in the same party, not a good mix. They'll want to eat the beastmaster's friends. And then...
Well, no.
I'm having fun. But I am at the moment very grateful I've not had the problem of trying to satisfy the air sailors wants to be on an airship with the same member of the party who has a cavalryman and a mount. So I'm so far grateful I've not had that party combination. Yeah. Although that would make a fantastic novel, I will say.
Right.
So somebody out there, write that novel. Get us Josh.
Mounted combat, take a few moments here to wrap up tonight talking about that.
Yeah. Because then we've got the issues of let's just start off with, because we started off with it a little bit ago, which melee weapons that they should be using while they're mounted.
Right. You basically like lances and spears or anything along those lines.
Yeah, longer weapons essentially.
Are longer weapons, that you want to have because of the way that they use them. One, they're able to use them one-handed because the way that they can sort of brace them properly.
Yes. So you're looking for larger size weapons essentially, because pole arms are like 5s and 6s.
Right. Or the equivalent. The other situation is that generally if you are doing a charging attack with a traditional melee weapon, there is a chance that when you hit the target, that you may lose your grip on the weapon, that you have to make a strength test to maintain a hold. And that is not the case with a lance or spear because of the way that they're designed.
Yes.
There is a chance that you might be dismounted if you do that and you fail the test, which is kind of bad. But at that point, at least you still have your weapon, which is not the case otherwise.
And here's a small little history lesson on swords, on mounted horses as well. The English had a problem with that because they had straight swords, broadswords on horseback, whereas when they faced, quote unquote, the infidels, and that's the term they used, not me, but the mounted cavalry of the Middle East created the scimitar, which is a curved sword, so that they could actually hit their opponents and maintain their sword. And so basically, if you want to just give the exact same stats for the book, just change the cavalryman's broadsword to a scimitar and let them not lose their weapon when they're in combat, I'm okay with that as a game master. So little history lesson there.
The one that we won't really go into all of the finer details of the like different types of attacks, but on page 397 of the player's guide, there is a sidebar. There's a gray box that basically summarizes the different aspects of mounted combat: stationary versus mobile versus charging versus ride by,
and all out charge.
Yeah, and the all out charge attack.
It's a pretty big box. It takes up 7/8.
Yeah, it takes up almost a page, but it basically summarizes like these are the things that come into play and the stuff that you need to take into account. And then the other kind of sections around there with mounted combat, which starts on 395 and carries actually all the way through 399 because there's some stuff on mounted aerial combat as well.
Yes.
Kind of talks about some of the more specific stuff. And then I just noticed that I'm reminded that the example in mounted combat actually uses Davin from the story earlier in the book.
Yeah, page 17.
But yeah, we've kind of covered on everything with the Cavalryman, some of the issues that you might have as a game master and the things you need to keep in mind. So yeah, no, I think we've covered it pretty well. And we're sort of now at we're just about an hour.
Yeah.
And so I think with that, we will ride off into the sunset of another episode.
That's a whole different beast. Because we can make puns. We have to. It's a requirement.
And call this one good for another week.
Exactly.
Wrap this up. And again, like I said, I think the Cavalryman is really cool. I think it's just rough, and I would really, really like someday to run a game that is Cavalryman focused to a certain extent, whether that be a Carafod focused game or something else where a cavalry, a mounted unit of some sort is the focus and whatnot. Yeah. As a limited series, short run campaign, something along those lines.
My friend actually ran a campaign once upon a time, and he was running Earth Dawn on the fly. I can't say on the fly, but he had his own storyline for it. He didn't do anything pre-gen. But he had a precursor adventure that we all got to play, and it was all these characters, and we were all air sailors. We were on a boat, and we operated the fire cannons, the whole 9 yards, but it was intended that we all die, because that was the precursor. Did we get legend points for it? No, but it was fun. And I think and then after that airship crashed, modern day bar save, we got to play the characters that we made and come across that sunken airship because it diggered into the ground and got buried during the Scourge and the whole 9. So that was the fun part. I think doing the same thing with a cavalry team, having everybody play the cavalry, doing that, dying gloriously in battle, and then coming across, and then you guys play your own characters, come across this cavalry remains or their legends, and you've got some interest in what happened to them as to how it was told through legend, because you were there and you know what actually happened, and so you can kind of compare the two. So I think that would be a nice way to start that.
Yeah, that's an interesting idea.
So
anyway, if you have any follow-up questions about Cavalryman, or stories that you want to share about notable Cavalryman incidents or exploits in your own games,
because we do love stories,
then you can. Then we will accept those.
Absolutely.
You can always drop us a line, edsgpodcast@gmail.com.
True.
Like, share, and subscribe. Follow on social medias and all of that stuff.
And we'll be here for the duration.
Yeah, we are not planning on going anywhere. We hope that you are doing okay as we, at least as of this recording, are at the very end of April.
Yes.
When this episode is planned to go up, there will be 2 days left in the Iopo's Lair of Deceit, Kickstarter. So if you have somehow missed that, you have until May 8th to do that. If you miss the campaign, you will not miss out on the book because it will still be available. You'll just have to wait a little bit longer than other folks who backed the Kickstarter and got access to the pre-release draft and all of the happiness that is in it.
Like me.
Yeah.
So, final question for you on Cavalryman. Would you give extra legend points to your players if they brought coconuts to make the galloping sound?
No.
That's just me. I would, but only.
Good night, everybody.
Put them away. So, yes, folks, everybody, thank you much for listening. We'll hear from you soon. And it's time for you to go make your own mounted legend.
Good night.